Good morning. I'm Doug Crawford with the Navy League of the United States in Santa Barbara, California. This morning we're very pleased to be able to bring you a roundtable discussion on the environment with Senator John McCain. We're at the Natural History Museum where Mr. McCain will be appearing with other panel members, and it's a very interesting history that Mr. McCain has. As a member of the Navy for 26 years, it's especially important to the Navy League that we hear his views and understand his perspective on the presidential election. Because if Mr. McCain is successful, he will become the 44th President of the United States of America. This morning's event is here in Santa Barbara, California, and the information that we will be showing you is information that is brought to you by the Santa Barbara Navy League. As a nonpartisan, non-political organization, we hope to be able to serve our local community with information, education, and an understanding of what the needs are of our maritime nation. Especially interesting is the fact that we've recently had Admiral Lawrence Rice, who is the deputy responsible for the Office of Naval Research in the Navy for the environment in our country. And that was one of the events that was held and brought to you by the Santa Barbara Navy League not long ago. So we ask you to enjoy, sit back, and be able to understand what the points and views are of a candidate for the President of the United States.
Hello, I'm Doug Crawford with the Navy League of the United States Santa Barbara Council, and it's an honor to be here today with the Executive Director of the Natural History Museum in Santa Barbara, California, Mr. Carl Hutter. Hello, Carl, thank you very much for hosting this event today on the environment.
They're very pleased to have you here. It's a great place to have an event like this.
Well, we're very interested in learning what it is that resulted in having the Natural History Museum be the venue for a candidate for the President of the United States in 2008.
You know, when we were first told that we would have such an event here, we actually received a little bit of opposition and even flack. People were concerned that a non-profit like ours would have a partisan event at their place. And yet I thought it was extremely appropriate, for one, because the event dealt with the environment, it dealt with energy, one of the great environmental issues. And number two, at our museum we have actually made it a habit to bring opposing forces in the community together, to seek common ground, to cultivate civil dialogue, to find solutions together rather than in opposition to each other.
Well, I thank you for that perspective, because it's clearly something that's needed here in the United States. And the Navy League of the United States works around the world as a non-political, non-partisan organization to be able to create dialogue and to educate the people about the needs of this maritime nation of ours, and to be able to work with the Natural History Museum, whether it's sonar in whales or whether it's the carbon footprint that we're creating. One of the things that I love about the Natural History Museum here in Santa Barbara is that it is so beautiful. Is there something you could tell us about?
Well, yeah, sure. Let's go around a little bit and have a look.
Can you tell us what we can do to help as far as reaching out into the community and letting people know what your mission is and what you need here?
Well, I think the first thing we want to do is we want people to come here. We have a huge array of programs, and in our programs, one of the things we have discovered is that natural history encompasses everything. There's nothing that exists that is not part of natural history. Ourselves, we people are part of natural history. The things we do, the things we eat, the things we wear, all of it somehow, somewhere comes out of nature. And we transform it through our culture, but it's all nature originally. And this is one of the messages we want to give. We want people to understand, by taking part of our programs, we want them to understand their role in nature, the kind of impact we have, and how we depend on nature in return. That's the important message. You know, we work with the Navy a great deal. Our museum has a very strong research program in the whale stranding network. And that, of course, gets us in touch with the Navy all the time. Last year, 3 very large blue whales stranded on the Ventura coast, and the last one we worked up down at Point Mugu. And the Navy was incredibly helpful in what we did, and we very much appreciate that.
Well, we're glad to hear that, and anything that we can do here locally to communicate that both to the Navy and to the public, we're here for that purpose, so thank you.
Great.
Morning. Welcome to the Santa Barbara Museum of Natural History. My name is Carl Hutter. I'm the lucky guy who gets to be executive director of this great institution, and I'm also the other Austrian in California. Natural history is an old-fashioned term for the environment. We at the Santa Barbara Museum of Natural History have been in the environment business for 92 years. And we're really pleased that Senator McCain has chosen this venue to convene a panel on energy and the environment. I believe very much that we have arrived at a time when we face very, very challenging environmental issues. And the issues are so grave that they will probably underlie virtually everything in the coming years that has to do with economics, politics, national security, and everything else. And we also believe that the challenges we face are so big that we will have to get together and resolve them by finding common ground, finding solutions together. Polarized positions will not get us out of the problems we face. For this reason, we have at the Museum of Natural History for some time now proposed and run town halls, and we'll do many more of these, and we hope that the meeting today, in fact, will be some part of what we all want to do, listen to each other and talk to each other rather than at each other. So I'm very pleased that we have this panel here today. I have been given the opportunity to just put in a very brief commercial plug for the Museum of Natural History. So after this panel is over, please feel free to stay at the museum. Enjoy the exhibits. We have a great dinosaur exhibit up. We opened a new Mineral and Gem Hall. If you go down to our Time Warner Seaside on Stearns Wharf, we have an exhibit on camouflage. Sounds like a military theme that goes with the senator. So please enjoy yourselves.
I'm Jenny Theodoro, the Deputy Executive Director at the Santa Barbara Museum of Natural History and Director of the Time Warner Sea Center. Today, I have the honor, and we all are excited to introduce Governor Arnold Schwarzenegger. Presidential nominee, Senator John McCain.
Well, okay. Let me start to get some action going in here. Anyway, hello everybody, and it's great to have you all here in Santa Barbara, in a beautiful city, and it's great to have Senator McCain back again in our beautiful state of California. Welcome back.
Thank you.
I'm especially glad to join Senator McCain in shining the spotlight on the need for a comprehensive energy policy that strengthens national security, protects our environment, and gives consumers more choices. John and I both are interested in protecting the environment and protecting the economy at the same time. He also knows that how to reach across the political aisle, which is very important. Reach across the political aisle, bring people on board, and make things happen. I have every confidence that once Senator McCain is in the White House, America will get back to the game of having a sensible, consistent, and forward-looking energy policy. I'm also happy that Senator McCain has said many times that he will grant California the waiver so that we can go and follow our own tough standards in regulating our vehicle emissions, because he knows it's time to get serious about global warming. Senator McCain today wants to stress energy efficiency, and of course there's no better place than California to do that. California is one of the world leaders in energy efficiency, and we use less energy per capita than any other state in the United States. And may I remind you, in the last 20 years, there was no increase at all in the energy usage per capita. That's because we take conservation seriously, and we are striving for greater efficiency all the time. Our Green Building Initiative, for instance, we are demanding that government buildings will be more energy efficient by the year 2015 by 20%. We have very tough and ambitious targets on renewables, 20% by the year 2010 and 33% by the year 2020. Our Million Solar Roof Initiative and other alternative energy programs will help us get there. Our low-carbon fuel standards will also dramatically increase our energy efficiency, and we will add 7 million alternative fuel vehicles and hybrid vehicles by the year 2020. That is an equivalent of taking 3 million cars off the road. We are putting the power of California capitalism and California research and California ingenuity to work, and we're getting great, great results. So I know that Senator McCain is committed to doing the same thing for America. So it gives me great pleasure to introduce the man that I believe will be the next President of the United States. Please welcome Senator John McCain.
Thank you very much, Governor. Thank you, and thank you all for being here. Thank you very much, and thank you all for being here in beautiful Santa Barbara, California. Governor, I want to thank you for, this is the third time we've been together on the issue of compelling energy, a compelling issue of energy, of our requirement to attain energy independence for our problems and challenges of climate change and the economic difficulties that the price of energy is causing to all Americans, particularly low-income Americans and those on fixed income. I'd like to welcome our panelists today. May I also thank the Governor for all the kindness and hospitality that is provided to my citizens of Arizona, particularly during these warm, balmy days in Phoenix, Arizona. So I thank you for all of the hospitality that you extend to my fellow citizens. And I want to thank our panelists here today. I appreciate the hospitality of the Santa Barbara Museum of Natural History and the warm welcome here in California. I'm here to listen about energy issues as well as to talk. I've been conducting town hall meetings all over this country, and I've also had the honor of consulting with experts and knowledgeable people because we need their input, we need their knowledge, and we need to hear the concerns of average citizens as well as the experts. So let me just start off things with a few ideas. We're in the middle of a great debate in this presidential campaign about the energy security of the United States of America. For my part, in recent days, I've been laying out a clear agenda to protect our economy from runaway energy costs and to break America's dependence on foreign oil. This is going to require the best efforts and ideas of our country, and I am confident, I'm very confident that we're up to the task. At a time when a gallon of gas, I used to say, is running more than $4 a gallon, and I drove through Santa Barbara and saw that it's now at $5 a gallon, I'm very sorry to say. But it means that our government needs to shake off years of partisan paralysis that has prevented America from achieving energy security. Nothing is more urgent now than regaining our energy security. We need to get it done, and we need to get it right. The immediate problems of high gasoline prices and of our strategic dependence of foreign oil are upon us. And in recent days, I've been setting forth a plan of action. When people are hurting and struggling to afford gasoline, food, and other necessities, common sense requires that we draw upon America's own vast reserves of oil and natural gas. When nations across Europe and Asia are building nuclear power plants to meet their electricity needs, America too must make more use of this clean, efficient, and proven source of power. And we must turn all the brilliance and ingenuity of America loose in the search for alternative energy sources, from cleaner coal and wind power to biofuels and solar. But even as we address our present economic and strategic troubles, we face a long-term danger we hardly even understood when America first learned to associate the word energy with crisis. We now know that fossil fuel emissions, by retaining heat within the atmosphere, threatens disastrous changes in climate. No challenge of energy is to be taken lightly, and least of all, the need to avoid the consequence of global warming. Among the compelling evidence of this danger, satellite images reveal shrinking glaciers, Antarctic ice shelves, and polar ice sheets. Our scientists have also been and measured reduced snowpack with earlier runoffs in the Pacific Northwest and elsewhere. We've seen sustained drought in the Southwest and across the world. The Governor of California has recently had to announce a drought situation here in this great state of California. In the frozen wilds of Alaska, the Arctic, the Antarctic, and elsewhere, wildlife biologists have noted sudden changes in animal migration patterns, a loss of their habitat, a rise in sea levels. The facts of global warming demand our urgent attention, especially in Washington, D.C. Good stewardship, prudence, and simple common sense demand that we act to meet the challenge and act quickly. To dramatically reduce carbon emissions, I have proposed a new system of cap and trade that over time will change the dynamic of our energy economy. We'll cap emissions according to specific goals, measuring progress by reference to past carbon emissions. By the year 2012, we'll seek a return to 2005 levels of emission. By 2020, a return to 1990 levels, and so on until we've achieved at least a reduction of 60% below 1990 levels by the year 2050. In this way, we will transition into a low-carbon energy future while staying on a course of economic growth. I emphasize, while staying on a course of economic growth. The purpose of this plan is to give American businesses new incentives and rewards to seek instead of just giving new taxes to pay and new orders to follow. My strategy gives people time to adapt instead of causing a jolt to your electricity bill and widespread shutdowns of traditionally coal-fired plants. For the market to do more, government must do more by opening new paths of invention and ingenuity. So I proposed a permanent research and development tax credit to open the door to a new generation of environmental entrepreneurs. I'm committed to investing $2 billion every year for the next 15 years on clean coal technologies to unlock the potential of America's oldest and most abundant resources. We will issue a clean car challenge to automakers in the form of a tax credit to the American people. For every automaker who can sell a zero emissions or very close to zero emissions car, we will commit up to a $5,000 tax credit to each and every customer who buys that car. In the quest for alternatives to oil, our government has thrown around enough money subsidizing special interests and excusing failure. From now on, we will encourage heroic efforts in engineering, and we will reward the greatest success. That's why I propose that we inspire the ingenuity and resolve of the American people by offering a $300 million prize, that's $1 for every man, woman, and child in America, for the development of a battery package that has the size, capacity, cost, and power to leapfrog the commercially available plug-in hybrids or electric cars. A small price to pay for helping to break the back of our oil dependency and should deliver a power source at 30% of the current costs. Energy efficiency is no longer just a moral luxury or a personal virtue. A smarter use of energy is part of a critical national effort to regain control of our own energy future. And in this effort, practical ideas are worth a lot more than uplifting lectures. It's not always a matter of making do with less energy. It's a matter of using energy in smarter ways. Business owners who invest in green buildings, as has been done here in Santa Barbara, can cut their energy costs by as much as a third. Homeowners can save hundreds or even thousands of dollars with better light bulbs, appliances, windows, and insulation. Many Californians have understood the benefits of green technology for a while now, and your governor sure understands them. Now we need to bring that smart ethic of environmental care to Washington, D.C. and act now. Our federal government is never shy about instructing the American people in good environmental practice. But energy efficiency, like charity, should begin at home. So I propose to put the purchasing power of the United States government on the side of green technology. Every year, the federal government buys upwards of 60,000 cars and other vehicles, not including military or law enforcement vehicles. From now on, we're going to make those civilian vehicles flex fuel capable, plug-in hybrid, or cars fueled by clean natural gas. If our great goal is to move American transportation toward lower carbon emissions, then it should start with the federal fleet. Across our country and abroad, there are 3.3 million square feet of federal office space. 3.3 million square feet. Add it all up, and that makes the federal government the single largest consumer of electricity in the world. This represents another enormous opportunity that my administration will take. By retrofitting where possible and by applying higher efficiency standard to new buildings leased or purchased, we can save taxpayers billions of dollars in energy costs and move the market in the direction of green technology. We must also redesign our national electric grid in a smarter, more efficient way. In some cases, our national power transmission system has not been built to match supply and demand. And the result is an excess of power where it's not needed and a shortage of power where it's needed. In the long term, this will require a serious investment to upgrade our national grid to charge the electric cars that will one day fill the roads and highways of America. And to save both money and electrical power for our people and businesses, we'll also need to deploy smart meter technologies. These new meters give customers a more precise picture of their overall energy consumption and over time will encourage a more cost-efficient use of power. In these and other ways, we can meet the challenge of global warming with all the resources of human ingenuity at our disposal. Like other environmental challenges, only more so, climate change presents a test of foresight, of political courage, and of the unselfish concern that one generation owes to the next. We Americans like to say that there's no problem we can't solve, however complicated, and no obstacle we can't overcome if we meet it together. I believe this is about our country. I know this is about our country. And now it's time for us to show those qualities once again. I thank you all for your kind attention, and now let us turn to my friends on the panel. Thank you very much. Thank you. Maybe we could begin with our guest from out of town, the former director of the CIA, the former Deputy Secretary of the Navy, a person who has spent the last decade or so focusing his attentions on America's energy needs, our ways of achieving independence, and one of the most knowledgeable people in the United States of America on this issue, Jim Woolsey.
Well, thank you very much, Senator McCain. I'm really honored to be part of this distinguished panel, but to tell you the truth, since I spent 22 years as a Washington lawyer, and then I spent some time out at the CIA in the Clinton administration, I'm actually honored to be invited into any polite company for any purpose at all. I want to touch for just a moment on one very important aspect of energy, and that's the way we drive. It's important that for all aspects of energy, we take into consideration that they need to be cleaner than they are now in terms of CO2 emissions and otherwise, that they need to be more secure than they are now, and that they need to be affordable. John McCain's proposals with respect to vehicles over the last several days are extremely important along this line because let's start with cleanliness. The tax credit for zero-emission vehicles and for plug-in hybrids, a sliding scale depending on how much one emits. The tax credit and the prize that he has mentioned with respect to battery technology both point toward electricity as a very important force coming up on the inside track as a way of cleanly propelling automobiles. In a clean grid state such as California, you improve your global warming gas emissions about 80 to 90%, reduce them about 80, 90% for every vehicle that goes from being an internal combustion engine to being a plug-in hybrid. Not even necessarily all the way to an all-electric car, but just a plug-in hybrid. Still an 80 to 90% improvement. And furthermore, you do that without needing any new power plants. Pacific Northwest National Laboratory, and as well as a joint study by EPRI, the utilities, and by the Natural Resources Defense Council, all come to the same conclusion. You can have 70+% of the cars on the road be plug-in hybrids before you need a single new power plant, all right? Because you're charging at night, requires some intelligence in the grid to make it easier for you to charge at night when the grid is very underutilized. But these proposals that John McCain has made are major steps toward cleaning up what we are doing with respect to driving from the point of view of CO2 as well as other emissions. So if you're talking about cleaner, yes, it's terribly important, and these steps move in that direction. If you're talking about more secure, getting off oil, yes, they move in this direction and do so decisively. If you are talking about being affordable and not worrying so much about that $5 a gallon tab at the gasoline station when you fill up, they also help you thumb your nose at that station as you drive by on electricity. Thank you.
Thank you, Jim. And in our discussion, we will talk about where we are in some of this technology, because that's, when you're passing, as you mentioned, $5 a gallon, that gives Lynn some urgency. But Jim and I were in Fresno yesterday, along with our friend Bill Jones, and we viewed 2 automobiles that are electric powered, pure. Now, the good news is that they're beautiful automobiles. The bad news is that they're $100,000 a copy. But their next generation is going to be $60,000 a copy. And I would remind you all of the cost of a cell phone when it first came out. It was around $1,000. Now they're giving them away for free. So we see the technology there. We see it. It's a matter of us devoting our ingenuity and our entrepreneurship and our capabilities to making that a reality at an affordable level for every American consumer. And that's one reason why I am proposing this $5,000 tax credit for someone who purchases one of these automobiles, because they are going to be more expensive to start with. But we can bring the price down as we brought the price down of other technological breakthroughs we've made that have originated in the United States of America, no place else. Michael Feeney, thank you for being here. All of you know Michael here, I'm sure, in this area. He's Executive Director of the Land Trust for Santa Barbara County. The Land Trust works to protect important open space, wildlife habitat, farms, and ranches. He is partially responsible. Maybe we'll give him all the credit for preserving the great natural beauty here that makes it one of the most beautiful places to live and to work and to raise a family. Michael, thank you.
Thank you, Senator McCain. I would like to share the credit for keeping Santa Barbara the beautiful place it is with a whole lot of other people who've been working very hard at that for a long, long time. And I'm a little bit bemused that I ended up on this panel because I'm not an expert on energy. And my background, my current work is in land and natural resource conservation, working through cooperative and collaborative methods with private landowners, public agencies, other nonprofits to try and protect resources and land for future generations. But I think the lessons I've learned there bear on the discussion today. And I want to first say that I appreciate the Senator's general approach in trying to point out that we need to have a comprehensive and a complete and a forward-looking energy policy in this country that we really haven't had. I guess I'm a little less optimistic about technology solving all our problems. I'm a little less optimistic about the federal government, particularly the Congress, being able to put its arms around these issues in a productive way. I'm sure the governor shares that belief when it comes to the legislature in Sacramento.
You're reflecting recent polling numbers, my friend.
Could be. And I guess I've heard both of the elected officials here to say in various forms and others say that we need to solve our energy and our national security and our economic security problems without compromising or stepping back from our environmental standards that have been long fought for since the 1970s and have done a tremendous job of cleaning up the air in California, of protecting land for future generations. We've come a long ways, clean water. But I see fearful signs, and I don't understand how it's not compromising our environmental standards to propose a crash program to build more nuclear power plants when the industry has not complied with the federal law that requires there to be safe disposal for the radioactive waste. There is no solution to that problem, and that's a big stumbling block for me to a rapid expansion of nuclear energy. It makes me nervous to think about those who are proposing to drain America's offshore oil and gas reserves as quickly as possible in the hopes of driving down the price of gasoline. Because I think when you look at the good sources of information, were we to open up the California coast or the Alaska National Wildlife Refuge to drilling, it would be 12, 15, maybe 20 years before those resources came online and got to full production. That's not going to impact the price of gasoline anytime soon. And the U.S. Energy Information Agency points out in an analysis they did that the Alaska National Wildlife Refuge, once it became fully, it got to peak production in the year 2025, would reduce our dependence on foreign oil from 70% to 67%. I'm not sure most Americans would think that's really worth the price of admission. And I personally think we should be saving as much as possible the oil resources of this country because we're going to need those for a long, long time to come. And we should be mostly focusing on reducing demand and improving efficiency. It made me nervous yesterday in the news when Senator Grassley from Iowa called for land that's been put in permanent conservation for wildlife habitat, grassland reserves in the Midwest to be taken out of permanent conservation so that we can plant corn to grow more ethanol. How is that not backsliding on our environmental standards? It makes me nervous when I read about the courts allowing the Director of Homeland Security to waive 20 environmental and health and safety laws in order to build up a 1,000-mile fence along the Mexican border. We've had an immigration problem for 30 years. Why is that now a crisis that requires us to roll back all of our environmental laws to address? So I appreciate the spirit that you're trying to promote. I hope that the Republicans and the Democrats can work together on a sensible energy policy, but I think we have to be very cautious about what I see as signs that we need to roll back environmental standards. And I also think that I'd like to hear more national leaders telling the American people that there is going to be pain and disruption and adjustment to our way of life in this country to address these challenges. I think too rosy of a face is being put on it. I don't think we can solve these problems and still, as happened to me yesterday, almost get run over by a lady in the Trader Joe's parking lot who was driving a 7,000-pound Yukon Denali to go pick up her 2 bags of groceries. That can't happen anymore. And that's the way we need to drive things, is to make people realize that all of us have to change, and it is going to be more expensive, and we're never going to see $2.50 a gallon gasoline in this country again, and we shouldn't. And I'll end with that, and thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Michael. We'll continue the discussion, and there's many issues that you raise. I would just like to mention one that you bring out with it, and that is about spent nuclear fuel. My friend, the technology is there. The Europeans do it. I mean, it's safe. It's being done. So to think that that is going to require some pain on the American people economically when the Europeans, 80% of the French electricity is generated by nuclear power. They're doing fine. You should visit their reprocessing. You should visit their reprocessing facility, which they've been doing for many, many years without any accident or difficulties or problems. And they are meeting closer to the Kyoto requirements of their greenhouse gas emissions, closer than just about anybody else. So there's been a tremendous environmental benefit associated with nuclear power as well. But I look forward to having this discussion with you. And in my view, you either store it or you reprocess it. And both of those can be safe. But I would be more than happy to discuss that issue at some length. But it's not a technological breakthrough that needs to be taken. It's a NIMBY problem. It's a NIMBY problem. We've got to have the guts and the courage to go ahead and do what other countries are doing, and they are reducing the pollution to our environment rather dramatically without any huge pain to anybody. But again, and I finally, and I don't, and in fact, I would like to have you respond, but the United States Navy has sailed ships around the world for 60 years with nuclear power plants on them. We've never had an accident. We've never had a problem. And I think the world is safer. I think the world is safer due to the presence of the United States Navy with nuclear-powered ships on. But again, we'll be maybe you want to make a quick response right now, and then we'll go to Matthew Terrell. Go ahead, please.
Oh, I appreciate your points, Senator, and I guess I'm not familiar with exactly how they're dealing with the nuclear waste in a successful way in Europe. We're not dealing with it in a successful way in the United States at this point. I know that.
Your point is well made. And Matthew Terrell, who's the Dean of the School of Engineering at the University of California at Santa Barbara, founder of the Institute for Energy Efficiency. He's been on the faculty at the University of Minnesota, where he served as head of the department from 95 to 99. He has co-authored more than 250 papers and a book, and he is in the mission. Could I just remind you of the UCSB's Institute for Energy Efficiency is to leverage and accelerate research, foster new research initiatives, develop technologies, and substantially increase energy efficiency in supplanting current technologies, and lead global thought in energy efficiency through international conferences and symposia, residences, comprehensive external communications, and staffing the Institute with leaders in the field. Thank you for being on the cutting edge. Please, Matthew.
Thank you very much, Senator McCain. Yes, I helped launch this institute along with John Bowers, Dan Colbert, Dan Burnham, who are in the audience, and many others, with the idea, very much consistent with the ideas that have been expressed by Senator McCain here and others, that cutting demand for energy is the largest, least expensive, fastest, most economically wise and rewarding way to bring energy supply growth and demand growth into balance. And growth is an important word in these sentences because we're not in a static situation. Demand is growing. And the rate at which it's growing is accelerating. So what we really need to be thinking about is a slightly different word that has been in Senator McCain's remarks as well, is energy productivity. How do we get the most out of the energy resources and indeed other resources that we have to provide the kind of quality of life that is demanded by the developed world and is increasingly going to be demanded around the world by the developing world? There's of course concern about supply. We're focusing on demand. There's concern about supply of hydrocarbon resources, but in my opinion, we're certainly more likely to run out of livable environment before we run out of oil. But the argument for energy efficiency doesn't really rest exclusively on climate change. It rests on the possibilities of exciting new technologies. And here I'm a little more optimistic than Michael, naturally, for a Dean of Engineering, about the possibilities of new technologies that provide jobs and provide return on investment. There's opportunities in lighting, building controls, energy efficient electronics and data centers, transportation, of course, which has been talked about here. And there are technological improvements in these areas, which while I think there does have to be some consideration of behavior change, can be made without insisting on demanding virtue or conservation. One can build great businesses in the process of generating energy efficiency. I think the idea of an R&D tax credit that Senator McCain talked about is really very important. It's one of the ways in which the U.S. can lead the way. And I think a point that I'd like to introduce into this discussion, which may not be obvious, is that much of what we can do in energy efficiency is not really directly related, obviously, to energy. That is, it relates to our semiconductor technology that we have to produce more efficient lighting, more efficient computers. It relates to our computer technology that can produce better control systems for buildings and in transportation. So if there is to be some kind of R&D tax credit, I would argue that it be very broadly available to new energy efficient technologies, and not only on the obvious ones such as clean coal, which I would completely support. There are tremendous number of ways and different kinds of technologies that can contribute to diminishing the rapid growth in demand for energy, which I think is really, as I said, in the short term, the most important thing that we can do. Thank you.
Matthew. As I mentioned in my opening comments, there are 3.3 billion square feet of federal office space. There are homeowners here who are in this audience who are experiencing dramatic increase in their utility costs, reflected by, obviously, the price of oil, the increasing energy costs. How does the average citizen make their home, and what does it entail to make their home more energy efficient?
Well, I think certainly the utility companies can play a big role in this. We have a rather special kind of situation with the utility companies in California where they do not really earn more money based on increased usage, but in fact can provide a lot of incentives for a variety of things that have to do with reducing demand for electricity from appliances, from heating, ventilation, and air conditioning, the slightly longer term adoption of solar energy. So I think working with the utilities companies that deal directly with the consumers is a very good way to affect the average citizen.
Could I add one point to that?
Sure.
California's tax credits for solar in many ways are quite superior to the federal government's because they encourage rooftop solar as well. And one of the things that is really beginning to dent electricity use, particularly peak electricity use here, is the governor's and the state's solar tax credit program. And I personally think it's a model for what other states and the federal government ought to be doing.
The governor and I visited a facility in Los Angeles, I guess it's been a couple of months ago, where you now have solar panels which are literally paper thin, as opposed to the old technology, which I have some of, beyond the great big thick heavy panels that we had to risk caving in the roof. I think that that's a classic example of the technology that's being developed, and it's not an accident. It was here in California, and it may have something to do with what Jim was saying. Governor, you want to?
Well, I just want to say that I think the technology is improving all the time, especially when it comes to solar. And because we have started this Million Solar Roof Initiative, and then the legislature passed laws also to give tax incentives and to help people to put them on a roof, so it is less expensive. But we also have seen that, you know, for instance, Southern California Edison and people, companies like that have gone out and made agreements with owners of warehouses and put the solar panels on top of warehouses, an equivalent of now of 165,000 homes. They're going to produce electricity for 165,000 homes. They will go directly to the grid. You don't need to build transmission lines or anything like this. So I think the more we get creative, and I think California has shown tremendous creativity in all of those things. It's also, we're working very hard now not to make our buildings and our homes, the roofs, you know, heat absorbing, but to reflect the heat off, so that when the sun hits the top of the roof, it reflects off. Therefore, you reduce the amount of money that you pay for your energy bills, because you don't have to run the air conditions that much. So there's all kinds of things that we can do to save money and to really have more renewable energy and not have to burn fossil fuel and all those kind of things. I think that California is very much very aggressive on this, and I'm very excited about the fact that the senator is talking about using those kind of things that we are doing here in California on a national level, because we don't have to reinvent the wheel at all. We have done it in California. We have been the lab for the federal government. We have tested all the things. We've seen what works, and with the incentives for hybrid cars and plug-in hybrid cars and alternative fuel vehicles and all this. And I think with the Green Building Initiative that the senator mentioned to make government buildings more energy efficient, I think he's right. This is the responsibility of government to be a perfect example, to show to the people that with the vehicles and with the buildings and all this, we have done all those things in California, and it would be great if it is also done on a national level, including the tax credit that you talked about. I mean, here now they are debating over for years, should we continue with the tax credit in the United States? Now, how much uncertainty does this bring to the industry of green, clean technology? And no one really knows, should we invest in this or should we not invest in this? Where the European countries are way ahead. We in California, we are shooting for 20% of renewables by the year 2010. The United States has renewables of 1 to 2%. Now think about it, the European countries, they all have already 20% renewables. We have 1 to 2% because there is really no national policy. And that's why I applaud the senator, because he wants to bring in, when he becomes president, to have a national policy to say, here's the direction we're going to go, because that is what was missing for a long time here in the United States.
Thank you, Governor. Did you want?
Yeah, I did actually. I think this point that you made about getting over the initial investment barriers with vehicles is, of course, important. The energy situation, very crudely in the United States, is that 1/3 of it goes to transportation, 1/3 goes to buildings, 1/3 goes to manufacturing. So there are other areas, especially in the building areas, where I think tax credits would work very well. Lighting is one that's extremely important. I think we're going to leap over quickly this phase of compact fluorescent light bulbs into semiconductor-based lighting. And the only problem with that really being adopted now is sort of scalability and the initial investment. So they're more expensive to install. If one could get over that hurdle, the manufacturers would introduce the kind of scalability that you see all over the semiconductor industry, and it would become less expensive.
Michael?
I think this is all good, and I think the more we can do to create the right price signals to consumers, which includes energy costs going up and energy efficiency becoming more affordable, and tax credits to help not just industries and commercial building owners retrofit, but to make it more viable, more economical for homeowners and renters to do what they can. I think, have it ratchet all the way down. My wife, who's in the green building industry, is constantly telling me we need to change out our windows and put in solar photovoltaics, and we don't have a lot of money, and when I run the math on that, it's not a good investment right now in California for me to make those kind of changes. But if there were incentives, zero interest loans from utility companies, tax credits, appropriately targeted to get a good bang for the buck, at the consumer level, I would encourage movement in that direction as well.
The tide and various oceanic ways of generating electricity through tidal motion and through pressure differences at depths and so forth are a bit behind solar and wind, but there's some real promising developments over in particularly high tidal areas like Bay of Fundy and so forth. Some fascinating work going on that may be applicable to other tidal areas with a very clean way of producing energy. One of the most interesting things that's happening is the expansion of the notion of geothermal. It used to be that people thought you needed, Old Faithful and something really hot, and then you'd have a big power plant like they have out at China Lake. But now people are starting to realize that even slightly different temperatures can be used in geothermal, and the notion is even spreading to residences. We have a shallow heat pump geothermal system at my farmhouse, and it just reduced our electricity costs about 75%.
How does that work?
Well, you down about, in our case, about 200 feet below our farmhouse, the water is about 60 degrees all the time. And essentially you just pump a cooling system through that water. You have to drill several little wells down, but you pump a cooling system through it. And for all practical purposes, with a heat exchanger in the house, it cools things down to 60 degrees or so in the summer and heats them up to 60 degrees or so in the winter. And then you boost it with a furnace or something, but you're not going from freezing to up to 70 degrees. You're going from 60 to 70. It works different degrees in different parts of the country, but and the geology matters, but it is, there's a lot coming in, perhaps in tidal, I think quite certainly in geothermal, and perhaps in some of the other areas that people are just starting to pay attention to, in addition to solar and wind. And let me just add one thing. The battery technology improvements that Senator McCain is talking about emphasizing also have a big effect on solar and wind, because sun shines in the daytime, wind tends to blow at night, and the grid doesn't like things that are either all the way on or all the way off. So if you're compensating and you got some balance, either because you have a natural gas facility near your solar plant, or because you're storing what's produced in much better batteries than we have now, you can balance these contributions from the renewables, including things like tidal, in such a way that it's difficult to do now, but the battery improvements will help a great deal.
Matthew, I think that Americans probably are not as appreciative as perhaps some of us are about just the energy needs for the next 20 years, the dramatic increase. And we're going to have to supply those needs. Governor, obviously all of us would never want to have rolling blackouts again. We would never want to have the things that happened in the past and are possible in the future. But we have an energy requirement that's going to be met. It's going to be met by coal or solar or wind or nuclear or some combination of those. So maybe you could help us out a little bit by recognizing we're not in a static situation. We are in a dynamic situation with the growth of our economy and our industries and all of the things as our population grows, et cetera. Maybe you could give us an assessment of our energy needs in the future.
Well, the expected growth of demand over the next couple of decades is to roughly double the annual demand for energy from what are called 15 quadrillion BTUs to about 30. And that's
Can you put that in more layman terms?
Yeah, well, it's going to double. That's really from what we have now.
Equivalent of a lot of new power.
Absolutely, it's a huge growth. I mean, I'm not quite sure how to put it in better units, but as voracious as our demand is now, within the next couple of decades, we expect to need twice as much. Most of that fueled by growth in the developing world. And I'm talking about worldwide now. And we can't really ignore that. If we believe that much of our interest in energy efficiency, say, is driven by concern about climate change, there's nothing local about the climate. There's nothing local about the global energy situation. We have to be concerned, of course, with our local situation, but this demand and the demand for quality of life around the world is going to drive this doubling of energy growth. And there's a near perfect correlation between reasonable measures of quality of life and energy consumption. The quality of life in the United States and the energy consumption that we have is equivalent to about 10 hair dryers. Here's a simple measure, 10 hair dryers running continuously. That's what we use in the United States in terms of energy. Our lifestyle is supported by that. In Europe, it's about half that, and it's more or less equivalent quality of life. In China, it's about 1/10 that, but it's growing at about 10% a year. And that's why the worldwide energy demand is doubling over the next few decades. So technological solutions, and we're not going to be able to tell the rest of the world, you can't have our quality of life. That's just not going to work. So what we, I think, have a big responsibility and opportunity to do via technologies is to help provide that quality of life globally without the tremendous demand growth that one is expecting. That is, without exacerbating it even more, to get the kind of productivity one wants out of the energy resources that we have. And that's where I have great faith in technological solutions. I'll just say one, that I think one has to think about Africa. It's a totally different situation from China. As you may know, wired communications in Africa have never been very highly developed. They've gone directly to wireless communications. That might be a huge worldwide laboratory for kind of off-grid production of electricity and local generation of electricity, and a way to create an infrastructure there that does provide the energy needs for the people but doesn't recreate our systems of grid and transmission.
I thank you. I'd like to thank Jim Woolsey for his great work and his continued great work and his actually in-depth knowledge and expertise he brings to this issue. Michael, thank you for your commitment to our environment and preserving one of the most beautiful parts of one of the most beautiful states in America, and I thank you for all your hard work. Matthew, you continue to provide us with the knowledge and information. You're giving us the knowledge and information in Washington. We've got to start making decisions. We've got to stop the gridlock. We've got to stop the fact that we can't seem to agree on anything, and we've got to sit down and make these decisions. And as president, I will make those, and I will work across the aisle to do so. I think one of the reasons why Governor Schwarzenegger enjoys the approval ratings and the support that he does from all over the state of California is because of the fact that he has been willing to reach across the aisle for the good of the state of California. I want to assure you that I will also reach across the aisle. It's time we started doing what's necessary for this country, and that means putting America first and our party second. And I want to assure you, I'll put our country first. Thank you for being here, and thank you, Governor. Thank you all very much.